Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us despite your occupied schedules. We really appreciate your participation. We would like to start fiscal year 2021 second quarter financial performance announcement of Toyota Motor Corporation. In order to directly convey to you the financial results, we have invited some stakeholders who are present here today, and this is distributed online to the media representatives. First of all, let me introduce the participants from TMC side for the part one. Kenta Kon, Chief Financial Officer and Operating Officer. Masayoshi Shirayanagi, Chief Officer for External Affairs and Corporate Communications. Without further ado, Mr. Kon is going to share with you the overview of the financial results. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. I am Kenta Kon. First and foremost, we would like to convey our deepest sympathy to those who have been suffering from COVID-19 and those who have been affected by the continued spread of the virus. We also would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to our customers around the world who chose us, as well as our stakeholders, shareholders, dealers, and suppliers who support us. Now, I would like to discuss Toyota's financial results for the first half of the fiscal year ending March 2021. First, consolidated vehicle sales for the first half ended September 2020 was at 3,086,000 units, which was 66.3% of the consolidated vehicle sales for the first half of the previous fiscal year. Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales was at 4,011,000 units, which was 81.0% of such sales for the first half of the previous fiscal year. Although vehicle sales for the first quarter, when the impact of lockdown measures implemented in many countries was severe, amounted to 69% of that of the quarter of the previous fiscal year, vehicle sales for the second quarter recovered to 93.1% of that of the previous year. Once again, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to our customers around the world who chose us and all of our stakeholders, including our sales outlets and suppliers who have made an effort to deliver as many vehicles that our customers want as possible. Consolidated financial results for the first half of this fiscal year were sales revenue of 11,335.2 billion yen, operating income of 519.9 billion yen, pre-tax income of 728.8 billion yen, and net income of 629.3 billion yen. I would like to explain the factors which impacted operating income year on year. First, the effects of foreign exchange rates decreased operating income by 120 billion yen. Second, cost reduction efforts increased operating income by 50 billion yen. Third, the effects of marketing activities decreased operating income by 970 billion yen, largely due to the decrease in sales volume caused by the spread of COVID-19. Finally, a reduction in expenses increased operating income by 115 billion yen. As a result, excluding the overall impact of foreign exchange rates, swap valuation gains and losses, and other factors, operating income decreased by 805 billion yen year on year. As for operating income for each region, although operating income decreased year on year in all regions, largely due to the decrease in sales volumes caused by the spread of COVID-19, we succeeded in securing operating income in all regions. Next, let me explain our consolidated subsidiaries and equity method affiliates in China, as well as our financial services business. As for our China business, operating income of consolidated subsidiaries increased by 34.2 billion yen year on year to 112.4 billion yen, thanks largely to marketing efforts. Our share of profit of investment accounted for by equity method was up 15.5 billion yen year on year to 79 billion yen, thanks largely to marketing efforts. Regarding financial services, operating income, excluding swap valuation gains and losses for the fiscal year, was broadly flat year on year at 211.2 billion yen.
Next, I would like to explain our return to shareholders. In this interim period, although the automotive industry as a whole was in a downturn due to the spread of COVID-19, we were able to record a profit for the first half of this fiscal year with the support of our stakeholders, including our shareholders. Considering these factors, we plan to make an interim ordinary dividend of 100 yen per common share. In addition, we would like to thank our shareholders for their continuous support and have decided to add a special dividend of 5 yen, for a total of 105 yen per common share. As for share repurchases, we have decided not to repurchase our common stock as a form of interim shareholder return. Although our profitability remains trying and impact of the continued spread of COVID-19 continues to be unpredictable, we remain committed to accelerating our efforts to sow the seeds for the future through investment in growth for transformation and actions for SDGs. Now, let us move on to discuss the outlook for the full fiscal year ending March 2021. With regards to our consolidated vehicle sales, we have increased our forecast from the time of our first quarter results by 300,000 units to 7.5 million units. Regional sales breakdown is as stated in the presentation. As for Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales, we anticipate that vehicle sales will increase by 300,000 units compared to our forecast from the time of our Q1 results to 8.6 million units. Regarding the recovery of Toyota and Lexus brand vehicle sales, we anticipate that sales will recover to previous year levels, namely approximately 100% in October to December and approximately 105% in January to March 2021. Next, let me explain the full year consolidated financial performance. We've adopted forex rate assumptions for October onwards of 105 yen per dollar and 120 yen per euro, which makes the full year assumptions 106 yen per dollar and 121 yen per euro. Based on this, our forecasts for full year consolidated financial performances are sales revenue of 26 trillion yen, operating income of 1,300 billion yen, pre-tax income of 1,760 billion yen, and net income of 1,420 billion yen. Now, I would like to explain the factors that will impact operating income year on year, comparing to our forecast at the beginning of the fiscal year. Operating income is now expected to be 1,300 billion yen, up 800 billion from the previous forecast at the beginning of the fiscal year. The detailed analysis is as stated in the presentation. Please see slide 15, which compares the latest operating income forecast for this fiscal year with the result of the previous fiscal year. Although we were able to report a profit, the first half of this financial year has just completed, and the environment surrounding us remains highly uncertain, considering the risk of a second and a third wave of COVID-19. In the second half of this financial year, while continuously making efforts together with all our stakeholders, including cost reduction efforts at all levels and efforts at manufacturing sites and sales outlets, we remain committed to continuing to steadily sow seeds for the future and to accelerating our transformation into a mobility company. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
We would like to start the Q&A session. If you have a question, please press the button that says raise a hand and your name will be called. And please turn on both the microphone and the video or camera. And we would like to have as many people as possible ask questions here. We would like to ask you to limit to one question per person. Now, Mr. Katori of Yomiuri newspaper, please. I will switch the screen, so if you find yourself on the screen, please start asking your question, please. We are now switching the screen, so please give us a little time. Now, Mr. Katori, please, could you start your question, please? Katori of Yomiuri newspaper, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, with respect to the financial results you have just announced, I would like to ask your appraisal and assessment, especially you made an upward revision. So what is the most important factor that contributed to that? What is your view on that? And at the same time, some European countries have locked down the countries, and the COVID-19 is spreading once again in the United States. So toward the second half, what is your assessment of the likely risk in the second half? That's my first question. And second question relates to the production. when you had this announcement in May, you already had impact on your production plants. And you also talked about that because demand was affected. However, as we look back, the recovery since then seems to be going on quite smoothly. So for the past half year, how have you been able to coordinate your supply chain? If you have been able to do that successfully, what were the keys for that? Those are my two questions. Thank you for your question. First of all, with respect to my assessment and appraisal of the financial results, first of all, the financial results between April and September, it covers 6-month period. The first 3 months period and the second 3 months period. So dividing into these two 3 months period, the first quarter and second quarter show different situations. I wish I could show you the PowerPoint or slide showing the quarterly financial results. Could you show the quarterly financial results on the screen, please? Thank you. In the first half, the operating income 506 billion. What you see on the screen relates to 3 months period in the second half. The operating income was 506 billion yen. So if we divide this as April-September period, the latter half, that is July-September period, compared with the first 3 months, shows significant recovery. And the margin of decrease in operating income compared with the first 3 months period has shrunk significantly. And on the quarterly basis, the operating income of 500 billion yen was generated, which owes a great deal to the efforts made by individuals, and that achieved the recovery that we are now seeing in the figure of operating income. And the fact that we've been able to achieve the recovery to this extent was also mentioned when the financial results were announced previously. We showed the projection of 8 million units and 500 billion, but we were not quite sure because the things were so uncertain. Despite that, and although this is just the half-year place where the first half was completed, but the fact that we were able to generate positive profit owes a great deal to every effort made by dealers and suppliers to deliver as many vehicles as possible. And it really owes the hard work of those people, and that allowed us to keep our plants running, and by us keep the plants running also allowed many related industries or suppliers to keep on their operations, and therefore the entire automotive industry has been supporting this recovery, and I really felt that in the real field. So that's what I felt in the first half-year period. And as I said, this shows only the results of the first half or half-year period. But as I look back in specific cases since the global financial crisis, for the past 11 years, we consistently engaged ourselves in various initiatives and activities. And those efforts created the foundation for what we see today. I strongly feel about that. For example, the financial institutions really supported us and cooperated with us. We were able to take on loans from financial institutions, and we were able to secure solidly the financial resources we need. At the time of the global financial crisis, we had 3 trillion yen, but today, with the support of financial institutions, it has been raised to 9 trillion or 10 trillion yen. And in conducting activities and business during this fiscal year, those support meant a great deal to us. At the beginning of the fiscal year, we really didn't know what could happen in charge of financial and accounting activities of the company. I wasn't quite sure how the things will evolve, but the top executives, especially our President Toyoda as a top executive, remained very calm and very stable, and that allowed us to make decisions whenever that need to be made on the spot. So that helps us a great deal, and I appreciate that a great deal. With respect to the second half, as Mr. Katori mentioned in his question, we see lockdown in place, and the COVID-19 virus is spreading, and we will continue to remain vigilant on those evolution and developments. And as I said, we only have actual results for the half-year period. It's not that we have a clear view of the next half year. So I will continue to watch very carefully the impact of COVID-19. In terms of the status of production, right now at this moment, for example, in North America or Europe, the production in April was almost zero. However, at this point, right now, we have seen significant recovery. For example, in North America, in September, the actual result was compared with previous year, 108% of the previous year's level. And in Europe, it's 102% of the previous year's level. And in Japan, the recovery has been made to the extent of a production reaching 104% of the previous year's level. So in a sense, the suppliers and supporters are working very hard. They're being kept extremely busy. They have a huge workload because of the strong recovery. So while preventing the risk of COVID-19 spreading, working closely together with the suppliers, we would like to keep this production momentum. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Katori. We'd like to go on to the next question. From Asahi Newspapers, Chiba-san, please. We will be switching the screen. When you see yourself on the screen, please start with your question. Mr. Chiba, please. This is Chiba speaking. This is Chiba from Asahi Newspapers. Do you hear me? Yes, we hear you fine. Question, please. Thank you. Well, I might be asking you on the details, but for the factors that increase the operating income, for asterisk number 2, the others area for then the sales and marketing, there's quite a large, more than 100 billion, 110 billion, and asterisk number 3, for the increase or decrease and expense reduction efforts. This is also plus 115 billion, 130 billion, quite a big number. And also asterisk number 4, valuation gains and losses from swaps, etc. It's 45.8 billion. So I think there are some accumulated from the April to June period. But can you tell me the breakdown of these? And in addition to that, for July to September term, is there any characteristic special factors for the second quarter on the positive side and the negative side? What kind of special factors were there in the second quarter? Thank you for your question. So for the contents, starting with on the effects of marketing activities, so for the increase, decrease, increase others 110 billion yen. The breakdown, there's mainly two factors here, and the first will be for the sales expenses. So this has reduced, and particularly in North America, the incentives has gone down. In order to, since we have been effectively utilizing our marketing expenses, so therefore incentives per unit has gone down, and also there was a drop in the total incentives because of the drops in the total volume. So this has had an effect on the positive side, and now for the other negative side. This is a global factor, but for the supply parts, the income from supply parts had reduced somewhat. And these two factors in a net has an effect of 110 billion yen. And the second for expenses, it is among the 130 billion, a large part of it will be the general expenses. So the business expenses and also entertainment fees, meeting expenses, event expenses. In our case, for example, consumables for the office works, office supplies. So including those factors, this term, this quarter, we have been able to reduce significantly. And for the business expenses, business travel expenses, of course, it is difficult to move or travel freely. But just looking at a non-consolidated TMC, there's about several billions of reduction in the business travel expenses. And going into the details for the consumables and the office supplies, compared to last year, we have been using only about half of supplies, and also the research and investigations are compared to the peak, it's about 1/3 compared to the peak. So, for example, we are doing research in-house with our in-house resources. So those are some efforts that we have been making to reduce the expenses. That has a significant impact included in this 130 billion effect. And the final part for the swap valuation gains and losses, this is accumulation of various factors. So the forex swap cost expenses, and also for the securities, and many of the details have been accumulated in this numbers of the gains losses from swaps, etc. And also my question was about the 3-month special factors for the 3 months from July to September. Sorry for that, excuse me. And especially for looking at July, September items, if there was a special factor, actually there was not. There is no special factors. So looking at the operating income from July to September, no temporary or one-time income or loss. There was no significant item here. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chiba. Let us move on to the next question. From Daily Industrial Newspaper, Mr. Nagatsuka, please. I will switch the screen. So if you find yourself on the screen, please start your question. We are now switching the screen, so please give us a little while. Mr. Nagatsuka, please start your question. Microphone, please. Mr. Nagatsuka, please turn on the microphone. Your microphone is still off, still muted. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Nagatsuka. Nagatsuka of Daily Industrial Newspaper, thank you for the opportunity for asking this question. In terms of capex for the current fiscal year, on the full year projection, it is 1,400 billion. Compared with the outlook shown at the beginning of the fiscal year, there is addition of 50 billion. Could you explain the reason for that addition or increase for capex? Thank you. In terms of outlook for capex, it has been increased from 135 billion to 1,350 to 1,400 billion. What's the reason for this 50 billion yen increase? There is no major factor behind that. The yen was lower than we had anticipated at the beginning, and therefore there is the difference caused by this translation difference, and also in different projects there has been some increase in project expenses in certain regions, and in other areas there has been some decrease in those projected investments, but there has not been any major change that resulted in those fluctuations. It's just the accumulation of the small factors, and this is the most up-to-date figure that we have announced today. Thank you very much. Mr. Nagatsuka, thank you for your question. Now let us move on to the next question.
From Chunichi newspapers, Mr. Osada, please. We will be switching the screen. When you see yourself on the screen, please start your question. We're now switching the screen. Ms. Osada, please. This is Osada speaking from Chunichi newspapers. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a detailed question. For the 6 months accumulated results in the interim results, number 3, labor cost. No, excuse me, not labor cost. For the effort made to reduce the expenses. So for the R&D, there was a plus 20 billion. So specifically, what are you talking about here? Thank you for your question. Here also, it's not a significant item that's included in here, but for the R&D expenses, especially right now, we are focusing on the case areas. So we are now shifting the conventional R&D activities to the case areas. For about 40%, it will be in the so-called advanced technology research areas. So the R&D expenses will be in this advanced R&D field, and especially for prototype expenses, those items have been continued to make improvements, and the effect on net, there will be annual basis a 20 billion effect. That is, I think, how this number should be understood. So that is all for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Osada. Allow me to move on to the next question, please. From NHK, Mr. Noguchi, please. We'll switch over the screen, so when you find yourself on the screen, please start your question. Mr. Noguchi, could you start your question, please? Thank you, Noguchi of NHK. Can you hear me? Yes, we hear you well. Thank you for this opportunity. Relating to the outlook of the future period, as was referred to in the earlier question, to a certain extent, going forward, the uncertainty remains very high. The U.S. presidential election has not yet been called. Depending upon the outcome of that election, the environmental regulations in automobiles or policies likely to be implemented in environmental areas might come out differently. So what is your assessment, or what is your take on that at this moment? And in relation to the outlook of the second half, what are expected likely impact on your second half results? Thank you. With respect to the second half of our year, as far as the outcome of a presidential election is concerned, the final results are not yet called yet. But no matter what the outcome may be in the United States, we have been operating our business for many, many years, for a long period of time. We employ many employees, including the dealers and suppliers, and also the local community in which we are allowed to operate. We are working with them very closely in the United States. And through those, we want to be a better corporate citizen, and we remain committed to being that. That stance will not change. By enhancing our competitiveness, by becoming even more competitive, we will continue to work harder to become a better corporate citizen. In terms of the outlook for the second half, we are not expecting any substantial impact stemming from how the presidential election turns out to be. Mr. Noguchi, thank you for your question.
Now going on to the next question. Kigawa-san from Toyo Keizai will be switching the screen. When you see yourself on the screen, please start with your question. We are switching the screen. A moment, please. Kigawa-san, I think your camera is off. Thank you. Now we see you. This is Kigawa speaking. Thank you.
聞こえてますでしょう
Do you
か
hear
はい、
me?
聞こえておりま
Yes,
す。
we hear you.
はい、
Thank
アメ
you.
リカの状況についてお伺いした
I
いんですけ
want to
れど
ask a
も、
question about the
先ほど
U.S.
販売奨励金の
regarding the
話あり
U.S.
まし
So you
て、
talk about the
削減
sales
がうまく
incentives,
効いてると効
and
果
you
的に
said
利用で
that
きてい
there
る
is
ということな
positive
んですけれども、
impact
営業利
from
益
the
でも非常
reduction
に
of
ですね、前
incentives
期
and
の
operating
第一四
income
半期と
level
比べても今期
compared
は
with
か
the
なり
previous
営業利益
quarter.
出てますが、
It is we see
ア
a
メリカの
positive
在庫水
impact
準、
on the operating income.
元デー
And
タの
for
デー
the
タが書きますと
inventory
40
level
日
for
程度
U.S.
で、
auto data
か
shows
つて
that
の
it's about
60
40
日の水準
days.
に
So
比
in
べ
the
ると
past, it
少
was
ないと
around
いう状況だ
60
と思いま
days.
す
I
ね。
think compared
イ
to
ンセン
that,
ティ
it's
ブ
quite
も
reduced.
前年
And
並みと同じぐらいの
incentives,
水準を維持
it
しているの
probably
で、ある
the
意味
level
こ
is
う
about the
非常
same
に
year
健
on
全な状
year.
況で
So it's
車が売れ
flat.
てい
So
るとい
I
うふう
think
に
you
も
can
見える
say
んですけ
that
れ
you
ど
have a
も、
healthy condition in selling
でシ
the
ェアも一
vehicles.
方で高ま
And
っているところを
Toyota
考えます
shares,
と、
it
非常に
seems that it is
アメリ
increasing.
カの販売が、ある
Therefore,
意味こう
that
回復を通
you
り
can
越して好
probably
調
you
な
can
のかな
say
と思うん
that
です
it's not
が、
just in
何
the
故にここ
recovery
まで
period, but
ア
you're
メリカの販
having
売
a
が
good performance. So why do you
調子
think
がいいと
that
いう
in
か
the
ですね。
U.S. you're
でそれ
having
からその
a
今後その
good
在庫水準
performance?
なんか
And
まだ
also
販
for
売店
the
の方
outlook
足り
for
て
the
ないのかもしれない
inventory
んですけ
level,
ども、
maybe the
どの
dealer
あたり
side
で
is
時
not
間軸
having
で言いま
enough
すと、
inventory.
まあ
So on
適正
a
な水準に戻ってくるの
timeline,
か、かな
when
り
do
生
you
産
believe
逼迫し
that
ている
it
というふう
will
にサプラ
return
イ
to
ヤ
the
ーの方から
regular
伺ってい
level?
るんです
So
けど
from
も、
suppliers,
こ
we
のあたり
hear
の生
that you
産とか
have
販
quite a
売の
tight
足元とか
inventory.
好調な要因
And
と、今後の
so
見通
what
しお
will
願いしま
be
す。
the outlook? How do you see the second half?
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you for your question.
北米につきまして
For
は、
North America,
この画面ですね。
yes, if you can see
3ヶ
the
月7
per
月
region
のセグメ
situation
ントの
for the
状
segment
況でござい
between
ます。
July to
だいぶページの後ろ
September.
の
The results are
19ページ
here.
目でご
It's
ざいま
on
すね。
page 19, probably in the
北米に
back
つき
of
ま
the
しては
package.
第2
And
四
for
半期だ
North
け見ま
America,
すと
just looking at second
増益
quarter,
ということ
we
になって
have
おりま
been
す。
increasing the
この
profit,
内容は
operating
自動
income.
車事業もも
And
ちろんご
the
ざいますし、
with
金
breakdown
融
here,
事
of
業
course, the
の増
automobile
益もご
business
ざ
is
います。
contributing, plus the
一
financial
つ一
business.
つですけども、
And
在庫に
so
つき
one
まして
by
は
one,
おっし
to
ゃった通
answer your
りま
questions
だ
for
まだ非常に
inventories,
逼迫している状況に
yes,
ござい
it
ま
is
す。
still in a quite a
車
tight
によっても
situation.
車
So
種によっても
according
違い
to
ま
the
すが、
model, the
主にやっ
situation
ぱ
will
りラ
differ,
イト
but
ピックア
mainly
ッ
the
プ
light
ですとか、
pickups
ライ
and
ト SUV
also light
中心に
SUVs
まだまだ在庫が
will
足り
be
ないと
those
いう状
that
況で
do
ござい
not
ます。
have enough
そ
in
の時に
inventory.
北米のメンバーに聞
So
きますと、
when we
やっぱ
ask
りインセ
the
ンティブ
members
を
in North
在庫
America,
の状
they say
況
that
に
the
応じてなかなか
based
逼
on
迫してい
the
る車
inventory level for the
も
the
そのお
incentives,
店によっても違いますし、
there will be
リージョンに
different
よっても違う
according
とい
to
う
the
ふうに聞い
outlet
てお
of
り
the
ます。
dealer and
それご
different
とに
according to the
イ
region
ン
we're
センテ
talking
ィブを
about
調
in the
整をし
United
なが
States.
ら
So the
きめ
incentives
細
are
かに
being
やっていると
adjusted
いうふうに聞いてお
accordingly
りま
and
す。
try to work
それは
in
非常に効果
detail
的
as
だという
possible.
ふうに思ってお
possible.
ります。
And we believe that will be most
販売が好
effective
調
in
な
dealing with the
理由ですけれ
situation.
ど
And
も、
for the reason why we are
今
having a good performance
今
here
一生懸命どちらかというと
is
在庫を積み
right
増してい
now
る
we're
ところで
putting a
ご
lot
ざ
of
いますが、
efforts in trying to
やはり
increase
新
the
商品
inventory level. But
をです
when you
ね、ずっと
look at the new products,
切れ目なくと言い
the
ます
new
か、
vehicle, the new
いろんな
models,
セグメントに
it's
投じてこれた。
we have been able to continuously supply the new models into the channel. So several years ago, the SUVs, we were said that we were quite behind and late in introducing SUV models. But now SUVs are being introduced to the US market and it's being taken quite well. That's what we believe the reason is. And for the inventory level, there's a lot of effort put by receiving the cooperation from suppliers to continue production and try to come to the level that we think is appropriate. So by the beginning of the term, we think that we will be able to recover to the most appropriate level. Just one additional question. So incentives from the other side, do you think that even without so much incentives, cars will sell? Is my understanding correct? We don't have to make too much effort in forcibly pushing up the incentives. Well, looking at the current situation, I think it's just a result that, as a result, we can say that we did not need so much incentives. Thank you very much, 木川さん。
それでは次のご質問に参ります。
Let's
中
move
部
on to
経
the
済
next
新聞
question
岩崎様
from
お
Tube
願いいたします。
Economic Journal, Mr.
画
Iwasaki,
面を切り
please.
替えますので、
I
ご
will
自身の
switch
映像が画
up
面上に
the
表示され
screen,
ました
so
ら
if
ご
you
発
find
言くだ
yourself
さ
on the
い。
screen, please start your question.
ただいま画面を切り替えてお
We
り
are
ますので、
switching the
少々お待ち
screen,
ください
so
ませ。
please give us a little more time.
岩崎様、お願いい
Mr.
たします。
Iwasaki, could you please start your question?
中部経済新聞の岩崎です。
Iwasaki of
音声聞こえてますでしょう
Chubu
か？
Economic Journal, can you hear me? Yes, we
はい、
can. Thank you.
中部のサプライヤーの
In
ところ
terms
で
of
ちょっと聞いてみたいん
suppliers
ですけど
located in
も、
central Japan, the
中部に限
Chubu
らずなんです
area,
けど、
and not limited to
コロ
Chubu
ナ禍か
area,
らです
but
ね、
throughout Japan,
生
in
産が
terms of
回復に
suppliers,
向かう中で、
as the
サプ
production
ライチェーン
recovers,
の
In terms of a supply chain, do you have any concerns? Or in terms of cash management of suppliers, am I right in understanding that they have subsided and there is no further concern? As we see rather sharp recovery, what sort of attention should be paid to suppliers going forward? How are you going to work together with suppliers or cooperate with suppliers? That's the first question. The second question relates to the effect of a cost reduction. In the first half, you achieved 50 billion yen. The benefits of that may reflect the impact of a production reduction, and especially in the first half, you foregone the price change of parts and components, so that may be a factor. But moving forward in the second half, in terms of cost reduction efforts, how are you going to achieve higher cost reduction working together with the suppliers? What sort of specific activities are you going to engage yourselves in? Thank you. In terms of concerns or concern about cash management or financial availability, do we have none? We need to remain very vigilant in terms of the developments on that front. With the suppliers, we are working very close together, and our procurement department, for each supplier that we are working with, are hearing out their issues and their conditions. So that's how we are doing. And this year, our procurement department are having very close communication with the suppliers more often than in the past and more closely than in the past. And by doing so, such information can be obtained from suppliers so that we can take necessary responses as needed. In terms of cost improvement efforts, we announced 50 billion yen in the first half. In the first half, usually we talk about 300 billion yen of cost reduction benefits. That's for the full year. And in terms of the first half, usually it should be around 150 billion yen, but that's a normal situation. So the normal situation generates 150 billion, whereas we actually achieved 50 billion. But this 50 billion includes 20 billion yen in materials price. So on the cross basis, we did have the benefits of reducing cost or saving cost by 70 billion yen. During this period, the volume, especially in the first part of the first half between April, May, and June, the production volume was very small, and partly due to that, the efforts were made to improve productivity, to save cost, and our support plans have been accumulating those cost reduction efforts. But because of the smaller volume, the benefits of that was less visible. In the second half, in terms of the full year outlook, we are expecting slightly below 200 billion yen. That's our eye level in terms of our target. So in the second half, we would like to accumulate and more in terms of cost saved. Thank you. Thank you for your response.
Thank you, Mr. Iwasaki. I believe there's still more questions, but the scheduled time is coming closer, so we'll just take one last question from Asahi Newspapers. Kamizawa-san, please. We will be switching the screen. When you see yourself on the screen, please start with your question. Mr. Kamizawa, please. I'm from Asahi Newspapers. My name is Kamizawa. So there was earlier another question, but for the reason why you have good performance in the United States is also my question. In the United States, they're having a large impact from COVID. The number of infections is also increasing. So in this environment, why is it that Toyota is able to have a good performance? And also for your outlook going forward, probably it's difficult to forecast. However, even with this widespread of COVID, you're able to maintain this level of sales. So does it mean that because it's not in a panic, you're able to have a forecast thinking from a stable perspective? So can you tell me a little bit more about your forecast going forward? Thank you for your question. Well, thanks to everyone's support and cooperation, for the reason why we are able to continue our sales is what I have explained previously. So one is because we are able to supply the products, and also the dealers, the outlets are looking very in detail to adjust the incentives, and those efforts are bringing out the results. As you have said, as Kamizawa-san has said, the infection risk is heightening. And so absentee rate is actually increasing slightly. That is our understanding. Therefore, it's difficult to have a steady view for the next term, the next half. It's not still in that kind of a situation. We will be watching every month. And monthly, we will be making efforts to build up our volume. And that effort and that attitude will not change. That will not change for a while. So that is my understanding. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。上澤様、ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Mr. Kamizawa. So with this, we would like to end our first part of the second quarter financial results press conference. Thank you very much for your attendance.